Welcome, traveler. Step into the cold mist with me. Up here in the cloud-shrouded spires of the Silver Peak, things look a little different. I'm going to guide you through this explainer today, but not as a typical host. No, I speak to you from the shadows, as a mere observer of a deeply chilling descent. We're diving into a dark fable known as the Architecture of the Void. It's a cautionary tale about a scholar named Alaric, and what actually happens when the unyielding thirst for absolute control completely hollows out the human spirit.
Every soul is merely a string waiting to be pulled. Just let that sink in for a second. That chilling realization was the exact moment Alaric's worldview completely shifted. You see, he stopped looking at the world as a vibrant garden to be tended, right? No more growth, no more shared human connection. Instead, it hardened into a gallery of ghosts, a cold, calculating chessboard that just needed to be mastered. It's a terrifying premise, but it sets the stage perfectly for understanding why someone would actively choose to extinguish their own internal light just for a taste of power.
So how does one even begin in this kind of dark transformation? Well, it starts right here, in the shadows of the Obsidian Mirror. Alaric realized a terrifying truth pretty early on. To achieve total control over everyone else, he first had to conquer and completely destroy his own humanity. Absolute dominion requires a radical self-erasure. Imagine standing before the Obsidian Mirror. It's this conceptual lens that doesn't actually reflect your face back at you, but rather the tangled web of shadows that human beings cast on each other. He looked into it and saw all the strings, all the vulnerabilities and attachments. And it hit him. To be the ultimate puppet master, you absolutely cannot have any strings attached to yourself.
Which brings us to the next phase of his incredibly cold descent, donning the Iron Mask.
To actually execute this erasure, Alaric reached for the iron mask of the courtier. He understood a pretty grim reality. Any true expression on a human face is basically just a target for a blow. Right? I mean, if you show people who you truly are, you're just showing them exactly where you can be hurt. So by pressing this mask to his spirit, he systematically carved away his own humanity in 3 agonizing steps. First, he shed all his lusts and vulnerabilities. Then, he purged his anger, completely removing any emotional friction. And finally, the hardest part, he killed that desperate, deeply human need to be known. The psychological cost is staggering. He literally hollowed himself out to become nothing more than a vessel of pure, adaptive utility.
At this point, he wasn't really a man anymore. He had become a void wrapped in silk. Think of it like a ghost haunting his own skin. Because he emptied himself of all emotion and attachment, he gained this terrifying superpower, the ability to navigate the absolute storm of human affairs without ever getting a single drop of rain on him. There was simply nothing left inside him for the storm to touch.
Now, what happens when this kind of emptiness is weaponized against someone else? Let's look at the vampire's fluid fortress.
This is exactly where our fable shifts from self-destruction to outward predation. Alaric mastered what's called the Fortress of the Fluid Mind. So, when a great conqueror literally marched upon his spire, Alaric didn't fight back with armies or raw fire. Instead, he used this brilliant dark tactic known as the Vampire's Invitation. It's the art of seducing your prey into unlatching their own defenses by welcoming a savior who is, in reality, a parasite. Alaric used his complete emptiness to perfectly mirror his enemy. He offered absolute agreement, twisting his own void to perfectly fit the exact shape of the conqueror's desires.
Just look at the extreme contrast here. You have the great conqueror bringing all this raw fire, rigid ambition, and massive ego to the table. And then there's Alaric. He utilizes a totally fluid mind with zero friction. Because Alaric had erased himself, trying to strike him was literally like trying to punch water. Eventually, the conqueror was so disarmed by this perfectly agreeable reflection that he actually shared his deepest, darkest secrets with Alaric, genuinely believing them to be twin souls. But of course, the conqueror had just invited a vampire right into his own fortress.
And that ultimate betrayal leads us directly into the necromancy of power.
The scholar who once just wanted to survive had completely evolved into an apex predator who secretly commands the lightning. His absolute go-to tool for this was cognitive inception. He basically became a necromancer of power. He would whisper these forbidden strategies so perfectly that the visible fools, his puppets, actually believed this blood-soaked path to glory was their own brilliant invention. He was just animating the dead weight of other people's ambition, effortlessly steering the entire ship from the shadows.
It's a never-ending dance of doom, really. You've got the puppets out there performing the grim work, totally exhausted and blood-soaked. Their labor is this eternal torment, completely trashing their reputations and staining their souls. But then, look at Alaric. He remains the perfectly unsullied observer. He is clean, totally composed in his bone-white robes, just reaping all the benefits of the carnage without ever getting a single drop of blood on his own hands.
So how does this grand design actually play out in the long run? That is the true architecture of the Void.
His unassailable fortress basically became an ancient, silent tomb where he could just sit back and watch this theater of calculated purification. And the timeline for this? It is just merciless. Day 1, the puppet goes out and performs the grim work, fully convinced it's their own grand idea. Month 3, inevitably the puppet falters, or the public finally catches on to all the cruelty. Month 4, the puppet is smoothly transitioned into a scapegoat, and by year 1, they are sacrificed. They ground the lightning of public hatred with their own blood, which of course completely protects the master hidden safely away in the void.
And here is the truly sick part. When the laborers are entirely broken and the public is completely exhausted, Alaric finally steps from the shadows to offer what looks like a final blessing. He presents himself to the world as this figure of pristine authority, like a savior descending to clean up a horrible mess that he himself secretly orchestrated. The broken laborers perish, and Alaric, the Void, just reaps all the pristine rewards.
He did it. He achieved ultimate sovereignty and made himself completely unassailable. But the cost? Well, in doing so, he became nothing more than a ghost, ruling from the shadows cast by other men's sins. Sure, he had perfectly mastered the world, but he was left with absolutely no internal light, zero human connection, and frankly, no soul of his own, just an empty reflection.
So, as I fade back into the mist, I have to leave you with this to think about. What pieces of your own soul would you be willing to carve away just for a taste of absolute control? And tell me, is the throne of shadows truly worth the loss of your internal light?